with that, we'll go to part 3. We're talking about some Second Amendment talk today. Very common topic on the show here. So we have a few different things that we're going to hit. Like we said, the Senate gun control bill was signed by Joe Biden this morning.
Yep.
So it was passed by the Senate, I think, just earlier this week, by the House just yesterday, and then signed by the president this morning.
First thing this morning. It's the first thing I saw on my Twitter feed when I woke up this morning at 6 a.m. I woke up early. I'm trying to be good about waking up early on weekends. Fuck trying to screw up my sleep schedule by staying up super late and getting up late on weekends. It's not a good idea.
So we'll talk about the Senate bill first. I don't know. What is the name of the bill? Do you know? Do you have the bill up?
I do have the bill up, as a matter of fact.
What's it called?
It is called... Oh, gosh. Where is it? It's called the... Oh, yeah. This is... You know it's good because of what the title is here. Here we go. This is the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act.
Oh, jeez.
Which also, as a side note, because they always do a bunch of shit in these stupid omnibus bills.
Yeah.
The first 3 sections of the bill are the Senate or the Congress renaming 3 different federal buildings, including a post office. Why is this in the bill?
Why?
You stupid. Never mind. We'll get into that later. But
all right.
That's the name of the bill, the, quote, Bipartisan Safer Communities Act.
All right. So there are a couple of things that happened in this bill. One of the first ones is it said, this is an article that I have from New York Post that I'm reading, and this is off of the Senate bill. Specifically, it strengthens background checks for gun buyers who are under 21 years old, which means if you're under 21, it takes a look back into your juvenile records to see if you have any juvenile felonies or any like violent crimes in there that would hinder you from buying a firearm. It provides financial incentives for states to create mental health services and implement red flag laws. We'll go over that a little bit later. It also increases penalties for straw purchases. A straw purchase is if, like, I know that Colin isn't allowed to buy a gun, I go buy a gun and then give it to Colin. That's a straw purchase, which is already illegal, and closes the so-called boyfriend loophole. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, too. Prohibiting romantic partners convicted of domestic violence from obtaining firearms. And I want to ask you, because it didn't say in either of the articles I looked at, is there money in there for mental health in schools? Is that a thing that happened, or is that not? Okay, it is in this bill. Okay.
Available via grants.
Via grants. Okay, okay.
Because we got to remember, the one thing that Congress is really, really bad at is being able to give money to lower levels of society unless it's directly to, like, a state.
Right.
Because they're not designed to give you money. But anyways.
So we should probably start by saying, here at Salted Streets, we believe that all gun laws are infringements.
Period.
So that's a good starting point for the end of this, right? Just to contextualize everything, we will talk about all this in the context of 2022 because that's the year that we're living in. But at the end of the day, all gun laws are an infringement. That is where we're at here at Salted Streets. So,
and you could say that safely, and I would not change a word.
So we're out here. So let's talk first about the background checks, right? There's all this talk, expanding background checks, strengthen background checks, expand background checks. The only thing they did was to people who are under 21 anyway. So there's only some states that you can purchase a firearm in if you're under 21 anyway. Federally, it's 21 for handguns, so it's really sporting rifles and things that you're talking about. A sporting rifle is like the actual name for an AR-15. The classification for an AR-15. There's all this assault rifles and stuff like that. That's not real.
Not real at all.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as an assault rifle. Unless, I guess, maybe if you have a rifle that you commit assault with, maybe posthumously you could call that an assault rifle.
You hit somebody with the butt of your stock?
Yeah, something like that. You assaulted somebody with your rifle.
Yeah.
But other than that, there is no such thing as an assault rifle.
These are good colors.
They are good colors.
Let's talk about these beers before we get too deep into this segment. I just poured this, didn't show it or anything, so that's nice. This is, what do I call this? The La Fin du Mont.
The La Fin du Mont.
La Fin du Mont.
And it's a Belgian IPA.
Shall not be infringed, pretty clear. Shout out, Joseph.
That's right.
You know
it is. It's a very, very, very clear statement. And it's like a second grader. Are you smarter than a fourth grader or fifth grader, whatever that fucking Jeff Foxworthy show was?
Fifth grader, yeah.
You could do that if you read that. Yes. If you read that amendment.
Yes. Yeah. So.
Oh, and I have a. Here, let me. Before we do that, I got a double, a Belgian double, which is also Belgian for double, which just means it's their sweet Belgian ale. And
super like a little bit like flowers.
Maudite. That's why I like Belgian beers, man. They're very floral, and it generally comes from the yeast and malt profiles and the spices involved.
Really nice.
Fucking bomb, dude. That's a one-way ticket to Flavor Town. Shout out Guy Fieri. I don't think Guy Fieri would be a fan of our show, but, you know, I'm a fan of his show.
One day he's coming on this show.
Hey, dude, hashtag life goals.
Even if he walks out 10 minutes in, he's coming on this show.
We'll get him in.
Yeah. Okay. So after that, is financial incentives for states to create mental health services and implement red flag laws. So I know that I just want the weapons that our private companies are able to make and have. 100%.
100%.
I think we said last week, Michael Malice said it the best, that I just want the right to the firearms or the weapons that we paid for the Taliban to have. Right? That's the bare minimum. Those are the things that I would like.
Yes.
So
I would like that very much.
I don't think that's too much to ask. So red flag laws. I know that you have a real stance on the federal incentivization of these laws.
Yes.
Right? So do you have a point that you want to make on this? So if you don't have them prepared, that's fine. I just know you were talking about it yesterday, and I want to make sure that I gave you the platform for it specifically.
But I would best articulate
we
it.
can certainly move through and come back to it if you'd like.
Let's do that, because I think as the conversation goes on, I could probably gain a better angle on what I want to say about that.
Hone it in. So we'll talk about red flag laws in particular, right? A red flag law is basically a law in which someone can report you because they are concerned that you might do harm to yourself or somebody else, and either the courts or the police come and take your guns, and they tell you that you can't have guns for a determined or undetermined period of time, in which you may or may not get them back.
Yes.
There are many concerns across the board about this, right? There are no shortage of cases in which people have had their firearms taken from them without cause, and after the investigation, after the time period, it's found that there really was no cause, and they had to go a certain amount of time without their guns. Not only so they had their due process infringed upon, right? There's no reason for them to do that. At the end of the day, they found out there really is no reason. There's also no shortage of people who have had terrible things happen to them while their firearms were taken from them. That's my personal, I don't want to say biggest concern. One of the deeper concerns I have is that what if something happens to me while I don't have my firearms? If you remove my ability to protect myself and then something happens to me, whose fucking fault is it?
Yeah.
Then what?
Because you're not going to get your guns back in any timely manner.
No, if the cops took them, then they're locked up at the police station.
Yeah.
And then you
got to wade through the court system where you defend your innocence because you are now presumed guilty instead of innocent, which is 100% anti-constitutional. There is. Let me hand it back to you. You just keep growing. You're on a roll. I didn't want to jump in.
No, 100%.
Red flag laws. Somebody coming to steal your rifle. What if something happens to you while the cops have your rifles in lockdown?
Correct. There's also numerous cases in which people have been killed while the police are serving red flag warrants, right? That happens. Yep. We just, not too long ago, there was a guy that was killed in his house, or in his cousin's house, when they went to go and serve a red flag on his cousin. Yep. And he was sleeping on the couch, and the cops fucking shot him, right?
Woke him up in the middle of the night. He was covered in a blanket, sleeping because he passed out on the couch watching TV.
Yes.
Big guys come in with guns, they start smashing, and they shoot him.
Right. Or an angry reacts, Joseph Garrett says, and that's so. We'll go over some of those kind of the quote unquote mainstream concerns, right? Yeah. I'm not denigrating them, but they're more common concerns, right?
Yes.
Is that concerns on what the oversight is, who has the ability to report these things, because we already have evidence, we already have cases in which people have been reported, and it's been found out that there really was no reason at the end of the day.
Yes.
Right? I've expressed concern in the past for my own times of mental health, in which someone just maybe who overheard a conversation, they didn't understand the context, that then reported me, and how do we? So let's take a stop there, right? Who do we decide? How do we decide who can and cannot report somebody, right? Is it okay for a random person to hear something out of my conversation out of context and then say, hey, I heard this guy, he's there right now. If you can talk to him and get information, blah, blah, blah. Does it have to be someone within your personal circle? Who do we allow to do this? Because
and this is where the problem with this particular law comes into play, because what this law does is provide money to states to help incentivize them to create their own versions of red flag laws. Every red flag law will be different in every state.
Right.
Imagine.
But the framework, I believe, have already been laid out by the federal government. I think that happened a few years ago. You go ahead and continue, and I'll look that up. But I'm fairly certain that maybe even Donald Trump, because he was one of the first presidents that said, take the guns and do the investigation later.
Yeah. Which is, if that's not an infringement on multiple rights, I don't know what is. But because what we're talking about here is the ability of the state to, without due process in the slightest, come in and remove your Second Amendment right by force. And there is nothing you can do about it until you prove your innocence in a court of law after your rights have already been infringed. And, I mean, there is a long list of precedent at this point. A couple cases of which we talked about last episode, where the government does not give two shits if one of the agents of the states infringes on your rights. You have little to no recourse, period, after that has been done to you. So you are just subject to this. And the problem here is that if you find a framework, that's awesome. But even if there isn't a framework, what you're talking about is giving money to states to help develop these red flag laws to put into place. And 9 times out of 10, the problem with the red flag law is that it circumvents due process every time. This is remarkably similar to, say, the Soviet communist state, the Chinese communist state, where neighbors are ratting on neighbors, family members are ratting on family members. Depending on what the incentive is, if your neighbor doesn't like you, if you have an issue with an ex, if you have an issue with anybody that doesn't like the fucking looks of you, they can call in a red flag on you for no fucking reason, and your ass is getting swatted by the state. Period.
Right.
It already fucking happens now. People get swatted all the goddamn time now. And we don't even have red flag laws on a widespread, national level. But I would imagine that our state does. I can't remember if we've covered this or not before. But
I do not know.
But you better believe there is no way that, I'm going to use Bilbo Swaggins right here, there's no way that Big Brother is not going to be taking initiative on somebody when their neighbor calls in and said, I heard banging on the house next door. I think my neighbor is abusing his wife or something like that, right? There's nothing to stop you from getting swatted at that point. And as we have seen, when there are aggressive law enforcement entries into people's homes without them knowing it, there will be deadly side effects. And I hate to say this because you generally only really hear about it if it's an oppressed minority that's getting killed by the cops, or a cop gets killed, or something like that in one of those means. Most of the time, the cops are going to come in guns blazing, and they're not going to ask questions, and they're just going to shoot, and you have no recourse against that. There's none at all. We're talking about Soviet-era communist fucking rat on your neighbor bullshit. If this happened, red flag laws are the biggest danger to American civility that I can recall in my entire life. This is a breach of privacy. It's a breach of due process. It is a breach of your Second Amendment rights. I mean, you name it. It checks the fucking box on everything that's in this fucking Constitution that says the government can't do this.
Right.
But because, hey man, if it saves one fucking life, doesn't matter how many people's rights we infringe upon getting to that one life. Not to mention you're going to kill a bunch of other people in the fucking process with all the goddamn swatting that's about to take place. Welcome to the south of the streets, coming at you every week.